In this video, we will build an authentication system using .NET Core. Before we start building the app, I would like to remind you that this video can be combined with other videos. So if you want to use C# with Angular, React, Next.js, Vue, Nuxt.js or Svelte, I provided some links in the description of this video. The combinations are optional, so you may watch this video without needing to combine them. Also, make sure to check Scalable scripts.com. Now let's create the app. Go to .net.microsoft.com and click download and download the right version for your machine. I downloaded .NET Core. So this is my IDE. I'm using a Rider from IntelliJ, but you can use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. It's the same. Now I'll create a project here and I have .NET CLI running in my machine. And to create a new project, write .NET new, and we have a bunch of projects here that we can select. I will select the Web API here, since we will create an API. So .NET new Web API. And the project is created. So now we can see a bunch of files here. So I will remove whatever is not necessary. So I will remove the weather forecast here and the controller for the weather forecast. I'll keep the controller folder. I'll remove Swagger here. So I'll keep everything really simple. And that's it. So let's try to run this project by running .NET run. And we have two ports. One is HTTPS and one is HTTP. So I will click the HTTP one. So nothing is running right now. What I will do right now is change this port because our backends, they will all have the port 8000, and I will remove the HTTPS. So the application URL here in properties launch settings.json will be HTTP localhost port 8000, and I will restart this, and now it's running successfully. Now let's create a controller so we can see something on the browser. I will call it auth controller. Here we need to set the namespace. I will call it auth controllers. And the class is auth controller will extend from controller from Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC. And here I will add a method. So I will create a public function that returns iActionResult, and I will call it register. And for the moment I will make it HTTP get. So I will not name it register, I will just name it hello. And this will return OK. OK means successful response, and we want to return the message success. So let's return this simple endpoint. Also make sure the controller is an API controller, and also let's add the route. So for the moment I will make it empty, but we will change this, and everything is okay. So let's see now. Let's restart and let's click, and as we can see, this is our first endpoint, and now we want to connect with the database. So I will open my database right now, and I will connect with MySQL. You may connect with SQL Server, or you may not have this right tab, but you can use either MySQL Workbench, SQL Server, or any other tool. So in my case, my user is root, my password is root, and the database is YouTube C# auth. So I connected with an empty database right now. So now let's make migrations to create the table that we need, so the user table. First, let's create the user model. I'll create here a folder. Where is the directory? Models. And inside, let's add a class user. So we have our user here, and now this user will have these properties: public, int, ID. We'll set a getter and a setter here. And let's do the same for the other properties. We need a string name here, email, and a password. So this is our user. Now to map this user with the data and to create migrations, we have to add some packages. So go to nugget.org, and here let's search for entity framework. And this is the package that we need. So we will use .NET CLI here, and I will copy this, and I will open the terminal, close this, and run this command. Except I want to have the version 3.1.0, because the version that the latest version has problems with MySQL, and I want this version. If you're using SQL Server, you may want to add the latest version. So we need also entity framework core.design. So the entity framework is installed. Now I want to use it with a command line like this: .NET EF. If you don't have this command, run .NET tool install global .NET EF. So I already installed it, so make sure to install this package, and we have the .NET toolset. Also, we need another package, which is MySQL. And what we need here is MySQL Data Entity Framework Core. So I'll copy this, and I will paste it here and install it. So everything is correct till now. Now let's to add the migration, we need first to create a context. So I'll create a folder here called data, and we need to add here a user context. So user context. This class user context will extend from DB context. So using Microsoft Entity Framework Core, we need to add the constructor here. So public user context that has a DB context options like this with our user context. Options will extend from base options like this. So this is our user context, and this will have a property here. So DB set of user. Don't forget to import the model, and this will be the user's array that we will work. So we added the DB context. Now let's connect with the database. Let's go to the startup, and here in the configure services, we'll add the services, add DB context. We need the user context, and inside we'll have the options, and the options will use MySQL like this, and we need the connection string to connect with MySQL. So to connect with MySQL, we will add the connection string here. So connection strings, and inside we'll add the default connection string, and it will be like this. The server will be localhost, the port is 3306, the user is root, the password is root, and the database was YouTube C# auth. So this is the connection string, and let's add this connection string here. Let's call configuration get connection string default, like this. So we added the connection, and now we are ready to run migrations. To run the migrations, run this command: .NET entity framework migrations add create users table. We need to build, so we probably have an error. So .NET build. So my mistake here, when I installed the entity framework core, where is it? It should be 3.1.10. So just a smaller version. So this was the design, and we need also the entity framework core. So if we run build right now, it should work. So it does work, and now let's run again the migration. Create users table, and we will have a folder right now, migrations, where we have our users table. So these are all the columns that it will create. Just the email is a nullable true. I want the email to be unique. So how do I make the email unique? First, we have to remove all the migrations here by running this command. So .NET ef migrations remove. So we removed all those migrations, and now let's make the correct changes to add to make the email unique. So in the user context here, we will add protected override on model creating, and we have this function that we want to override. Here what we want to do is add model builder entity. We want the user here, and what we want to do is call the entity, and the entity will have has index, the entity email. Here we will pass the email, and is unique. So with this we will call the user entity, and we will say that this email is unique. So let's run the migration again, and now it will have the email as a unique index. So we created it, and now if we see the users, we'll say here that here the index is email is unique to true. So now everything is correct, and now let's run the migration. So .NET ef migrations update, and let's see. Sorry, I made a mistake. It should not be migration, it should be database. And now the build has succeeded, and if we refresh the table, we'll see the migration history here and the users table with the fields that we wanted. So we have the ID, name, email, and password, and also the email is unique. So now we have the user model that is connected with the database, and what is left is adding the methods to register the user in our controller. But first we have to create the user repository. So in the data here, I'll create an interface and a class. So let's create first the interface. I'll call it user repository, and this user repository will have some functions, but the first one is user create, and we'll pass a user as a variable here. So this interface, we will inject it here. So we will get the constructor, so public auth controller. Inside we will have the user repository as a repository, and I will initialize this. So we'll get the user repository as a property inside the controller. We will set it here, and we can use it directly. So this repository, if we use it here, we'll have the method create that we just added in our interface. So this will be available, but we need also to implement it. So to implement it, we need to add another class, which is the user repository, and this class will implement that interface. So let's implement the missing members, which is this user create here. Before adding anything here, we need to inject the context, this user context here. So let's add also the constructor here, user repository, and this user repository will have the user context as an inject variable. So, and we need to introduce the user context here also. So this is not called inject variable, sorry, my bad. This is called dependency injection. So we have the context here, and now let's implement the user that we want to create. And this is really simple. We have to call a context. We have the users. So in our context, we have the DB set, which is users. And we want to add another user. So this user here. And that's it. So the context, in the end, it needs to save the changes. Since this has user here, we have to return the user that was just created. This user that we set here doesn't have the ID. So what I will do right now is set the user.id is equal to this. So when we save changes, this will return the ID of the user that was just created. In the end, let's return that user. So we finished the create method, and Now, how do we distinguish that this iUser repository is a type of this user repository? Because other classes can implement the same interface. How do we make sure that this is the type of user repository? And to do that, we have to do it in the startup. So in the controllers here, we will add services, add scoped, and we will say that the iUser repository is a type of user repository. I made a mistake. This should be with these signs. And with this, we can say that the iRepository that we inject here is a type of user repository, so we can use this function. And now we have that function. Let's create the register method. And before adding the method, I will change the route to API here. So it should start with API, and this method is HTTP now post. And the endpoint is register. So this route now becomes API/register, and the method is register. Now let's test this endpoint. First, let's run .NET run, and also make sure to install Postman. So to test this endpoint, we have to install Postman. I already did it, and let's add the endpoint here, which is HTTP localhost port 8000/API/register. And this is not a GET request. If we send the error, and the request will get the method not allowed. This is a POST request right now, and we are getting success. So now we send a POST request to API/register, and we want to get the request data inside here. So to transfer data, we have to use DTOs. So I will create another folder here, DTOs. DTO stands for Data Transfer Objects. So inside, I'll create another class, and I'll call it Register DTO. And this DTO will have what data we will send from the front end. So we'll send a name, set get here. We'll send an email and a password. So these are all the data that we will send, and we can use those here. So register DTO, I'll call it DTO. Now with this DTO, let's create our user. So let's create a variable user is equal to new user, and I will manually set the values. So the values for this user will be the name. So let's import it. Name, which is equal to DTO.name. Email is equal to DTO.email. And the password, we have DTO.password, but we have to hash our password. So let's go to nugget.org and get bcrypt here. So we need this package here, and I will copy it and install it to the CLI. Not this, I'll paste it and I will install it. So now let's hash this password by using bcrypt.net bcrypt hash password, and we'll pass this password here. So now when we create the user, we will have the password hashed. And now let's send this user to the repository. So we have to call here repository dot create and we'll pass the user, and the user will be created. And we want the user to be in the response. So instead of OK here, I'll return created. The message is the same and the value is the return of this repository create. So that's it. Now let's try to register this user. So we'll send the data. We'll send a name, a email, at.com, and the password is also a. So this is basically the DTO, so the exact same data as the user as a registered DTO. So this will be mapped here and we will create our user. Let's send the request. So I forgot to .net run. Let's send the request again, and as we can see, we get the ID, the name, the email, and the password, which is hashed. So this is also inserted in the database. If we check the users, everything is correct. So we registered our user. Now with this user that is registered, what is left is to log in. So let's create another function. iAction result login. This will be also a post request to API/login. So let's add also a DTO for the login. So I will add here a new class, login DTO. And this will have the same as register, except we don't have the name. Here we'll send only the email and the password. And in the out controller, here we'll send the login DTO. So what do we want to do with this login DTO? First, we want to get the user from the email. So I will add in the iUser repository another function which also returns a user, which is get by email. So we'll send a string here, email, and that's it. So in the user repository, now we need to add public user get by email. And to get the user by email, simply return context users first or default, and we will loop the users and we will get the user with the email which is equal to this email. And that's it. So with this we'll get the email. Let's go to the out controller. Var user is equal to repository get by email, and we'll pass DTO email here. So in case the user is null, so we send the wrong email, what we want to do, I'll wrap it with curly braces, we want to return a bad request, and we want to return also a message. So new message is equal to invalid credentials. Also return the user in the end. So if the user is null, we will return this message. So we won't return the user, so it should be like this better. And in case The second condition now is we find the user with the email, but the password is incorrect. So I'll add another condition here. If not, so I'll add an exclamation point here, and I'll call bcrypt again. .net.bcrypt verify. We want to check if the password is correct. So dto.password is the same as the user that we found password. And if that fails, also we'll return the same error. So we return the same error because we don't want to know which is the wrong, the email or the password. So this is a little bit more secure. And if everything is correct, we return the user. So let's try this endpoint right now. So first, let's restart. I'll copy this, open a new tab, and this will be a post request to API/login. And in the body, we'll send an email, which is a@a.com, and the password, which is A. But I will send the wrong email, send the request, and we will get invalid credentials. Also bad request here. So the email is wrong in this case. If we send the wrong password, we'll get the same error, but we don't know which of these is wrong. In the end, if we send the correct data, we'll get the user that we want. Actually, we don't want to return the user here. Now, with these validations, we pass the validations, we have to generate a JWT token. So first, let's get the package. I'll search here JWT, and we need this. So system identify model tokens JWT. I'll copy the link and I will install it. Now it's finished. Now let's generate a JWT token. So I'll create first another folder. I'll call it helpers, and I will create a class called JWT service. So we want to create here two functions. So the first one is generate. So this will be a public string generate, and we will pass int ID. So we'll pass the user ID here, and we want to generate a JWT token. And how do we do it? First, we have to get the security key. So we have to get the secure key here. So it's public string, not public, private string secure key. So this is a key that we want to encode our JWT with this ID. So what I will do here, I will write this is a very secure key. So it should be a long string, otherwise we will have an error if we put a short string. So I added the secure key, and now let's use it. So we have to get bytes, which is equal to new symmetric security key encoding UTF-8 get bytes of this secure key. So maybe bytes is not the right name, but symmetric security key I will call it. And we have this. Now we have to get the credentials. are equal to new sign-in credentials. We'll pass our symmetric security key, and we need the security algorithm, which is security algorithm HMAC. So this is the security algorithm. I cannot pronounce it. So with this, we created the credentials, and now we need the JWT header. So I'll call it header is equal to new JWT header, and we will pass the credentials. So we got the JWT header, and now let's use this ID by creating a payload. So let's create a payload. The payload is a data that we set. So these are standard security data. So we merge this with the secure key, and the payload is the data that we want to encode. So this will be equal to new JWT payload, and inside we'll pass the issuer. So the ID is our issuer, so we have to pass also other values which we don't need. So the first one is the issuer, the second one is the audience claims, and this should be null also. And the last one is the time that this token will expire. So I'll add daytime today, and I will add day to 1. So this will live for 1 day, this token. Also, we are having an issue with the issuer, since this should be a string. So we created a JWT payload that has the issuer this value. We don't need these values, but we can set the expiration time to tomorrow. So now let's combine the header with the payload. So we have to create here var security token is equal to new JWT security token, and we will pass inside the header and the payload. And that's it. We created the security token, and the last step is to return it as a string. So because this is not a string, and to return it as a string, we have to return here new JWT security token handler write token, and we'll pass a token. This is a security token. So this is our generate method. All these steps are required to create a JWT string. So let's use it to our auth controller, and we want to inject it also here. So I will create here JWT service. Let's also add it here. So we have the injection for the JWT service, and our JWT is equal to JWT service generate, and we'll pass the user ID. So this should be uppercase. And for the moment, let's return a new JWT. So I will return it like this. Let's see it on the browser, how it looks like. So let's send the request, and I have to restart it. So it should be .NET run send request. So I should add the JWT service in the startup here. So I'll duplicate this, and we need to add here the JWT service. So it's a good idea to have also the JWT service interface, but I won't complicate it. I will keep it simple. And let's restart it. And this time should work. So send request. And as we can see, we got a JWT here. So this is a token that we want to send it to the front end. So it's not enough that we return the JWT as a value here, because we have to return it as an HTTP only cookie. So what is the last step right now is adding a response, cookies, append. We will add a cookie named JWT. The value will be our JWT value that we set. And we have some options, which are new cookie options. And I want to set here HTTP only to true. So now the JWT will be inside an HTTP only cookie where the frontend cannot access it. The only purpose of an HTTP only cookie is to get it in the backend, and the backend can modify it or access it. The frontend just have to get it and send it. And instead of a JWT here, I will send a message to success. That's it. So right now we are generating a JWT, and we will set it to the cookies, and the frontend doesn't have to access it. So the same request, I will run a .NET run here. So we can see we don't have any cookies right now. Let's send the request. We'll get a message success, but we also get a JWT cookie, which we set as an HTTP only value. So the JWT is set. So we are not finished yet, because for the front-end to get this cookie, we have to add also another option, which is credentials. So to do this, we have to get another package here called course. So we have this package. I'll copy it and I will install it. And let's go to the startup. And here on top, I will use services, add course. So before I continue, what is course? So course, when we create a single page application, the browser will prevent requests from different ports. So our port is 8000 in this app, and the frontend will run on different ports. And if the frontend sends a request to our backend, it will prevent that. And to not allow it, we have to add course here. And we have to add also another configuration here after the routing. So we have to add app use course, and this will have some options, and we will add the options. So what options do we want to add? So we will allow any header, we will allow any method, and this was the important one, allow credentials. So this is the option that we need in order to send cookies in the front end. If we don't add this option, the front end won't get those cookies. And also we need to add here with origins. We will want to specify the origins that will access this endpoint, and I'll create a new array here. And we need these endpoints, which is HTTP localhost port 3000. This is for React. I'll copy the URL. Let's add another one. 8080, this is for view, and 4200, this is for Angular. So these are the ports that I'll add for all of them, but you can pick only one, which front end you want. So now that we added the course, everything else should be correct. It won't change anything from the request, so this is not something that we will see a difference in Postman, but the front end will need that. And now the login has finished. Now let's get the authenticated user. So let's create the function public iActionResult user, and this is a GET request, HTTP GET to user. And now we want to get the user based on the JWT token that we set in the cookies. So first, let's get the JWT, which is equal to request cookies JWT. So with this, we got the JWT, and now we want to decode. So here we encoded the JWT. Now we have to decode it. So we will add a new method here, which is public bool verify, and we will pass a JWT as a string. So string JWT. So now let's verify this token. First, let's create the token handler, which is equal to JWT security token handler. We need to get the key, which is in bytes. So key is equal to encoding ASCII get bytes of the secret key that we have, secure key. So now we have the key as bytes. Now we have the token handler. I forgot new here, sorry. And now we have to validate the token. So we will use this token handler, validate token. We'll pass a JWT, and we will pass a new token validation parameters. We will add the parameters later, but this will output. So we want to get out a security token validated token. So this is what we want to return. And also now let's add the parameters. So we need some parameters. The first one is the issuer signing key, which is equal to new symmetric security key, and we'll pass the key that we generated as bytes here. And the other one are options. So validate issuer signing key to true, and that's it. So these are enough to validate our token, but we have to add two more, which are the validate issuer to false. We have to manually set that don't validate these things. Validate audience to false, and that's it. So we got everything. So we got the validated token here, and I returned bool here, but actually I will change this. We will return a JWT security token, and this will be our validated token, and we have to cast it also. like this. So we will get our validated token now, and let's use it to our auth controller. So let's get the token. So var token is equal to JWT service verify, and we'll pass the JWT that we got from the cookies. We got the token now, and now let's get the user ID. So I will do it int user ID is equal to token issuer is what we want, but the issuer is a string, so can I cast it to integer? So I have to use int parse the token issuer. So we successfully got the user ID now. What is left is querying the user. So let's go to the iUser repository, and I will duplicate this get by ID, and I will pass here an int for the ID of the user. Let's add it also to the user repository. So I'll copy this, paste it, and this is get by ID. And this accepts an int as an ID. So the change here is we will get the user by the ID. And that's it. So let's go to the auth controller now, and our user is equal to repository get by ID. We'll pass the user ID, and let's return an OK response for the user. Also, something else, an error may happen anytime here. So what I want to add here, I will wrap it with a try catch, because the token can be invalid or a lot of problems can happen here. So this will have a general exception which we won't use, but in the end I will return unauthorized. So in case we have an error, we will return unauthorized. So we won't use the exception here. And now let's see it. So first let's restart the server, and I will copy this URL, paste it here, and we'll send a GET request to the user. Also, something to mention is that the cookie will be preserved. If we send the request here now, we will have also this cookie that we generated in the other tab. So let's send the request, and as we can see, we get the authenticated user, and we got also the cookie. So this is the user that we got from the cookie. We validated it and we queried it. So this is our authenticated user. Also, something else, I don't want to return the password if we get the authenticated user, because this value should be secure. And to fix that, in the password here, I'll add decorator JSON ignore. So with this, when we return the response as a JSON, we won't return the password. Send request again now, and as we can see, we get the ID, the name, and the email. This will work also for the register. So let's create another user right now. Send, and we created the user, but we are not returning the password. So we logged in, we got the authenticated user. The last function now is to log out. So let's add here public iAction result, logout, and this will be an HTTP post to logout. And this will be very simple. We will simply remove the cookie that we set. So response cookies, delete the JWT, and that's it. So in the end, let's return OK, new message, success. So this is our logout function. The only purpose is to remove the cookie. Now, so let's restart the server, send a post request to logout, and before sending the request, here we get the authenticated user because we got the cookie. And now let's send a request to logout. We got message success and we remove the cookie. The cookie is removed here, which means it will be removed here. Let's send the request and we get unauthorized. So we successfully logged out. We can log in again and we can get the user again. So this is how our authentication works. I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you did, please share and subscribe. Thank you.